Hello, before we get started, let us first introduce ourselves. I am Claire Gilroy-Scott.
And I'm Katie Dias. We are both solicitors in the employment team at the city law firm Goodman Derrick.
We ran a survey last summer to find out how businesses were actually using social media. We found that 96% of businesses had a presence on at least one social media site, with Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook being the most popular channels. Our survey results confirmed what we thought, that social media has really become embedded in the workplace.
So to help educate you about the employment law risks associated with social media use, we have created a series of podcasts to help employers. This is part 5, which provides an overview of what we think should be included in your social media policy.
We also found out that 50% of businesses who responded to our survey had a social media policy in place. The most popular way of promoting that policy was to include it in a staff handbook. But what makes a good social media policy?
Well, this will be driven by your business needs and the risks that you face, but it is likely to include some or all of the following.
A consideration of what access will be allowed to social media platforms. Do you allow access to personal sites during work time and/or on company property? Whatever you decide, make the rules clear.
Are there any prohibitions? Obviously, bullying and harassment, postings that jeopardise confidentiality and intellectual property should not be allowed. But also think wider. What about careless comments that damage client relationships? For example, expressing a strong view on Brexit may alienate some business relations. You should also consider potential defamation issues too. Employers should warn their employees not to make derogatory or detrimental comments about the employer, but again think very widely. This could include posting photos with company logos in the background, or doing something whilst wearing company uniform.
A policy should give guidance on using social media for business and personal purposes. For example, is the employee authorised to speak on behalf of the company? Can the employee endorse connections on LinkedIn? You will also want to tie this in with compliance and other company policies, such as the Equal Opportunities Policy and Data Protection Policy. Coverage about posts made on their own equipment and in their own time, but which comment on work-related matters or relationships, may damage the employer's reputation or need to be addressed too. Consider parts 2 and 3 of our podcast series for more guidance on this.
It would also be sensible to include information about the business contacts made on social media. Who owns those social media contacts? This can be a complex issue. If you haven't already, check out part 4 of our podcast series for details.
Your policy should also cover guidance for the recruitment process. For example, will you screen applicants during social media? For more information, listen to part 1 of our podcast series to hear about the risks involved with screening applicants.
And finally, you will want to set out the consequences if the employee breaches the policy. Disciplinary action or dismissal is perhaps obvious, but think about what else you might need. Will there be a requirement to remove the offensive post or issue an apology? It is also worth reminding employees that they may have personal liability if there are discrimination issues involved. Essentially, social media policy content will boil down to 3 main categories: the expectations, how should the employee behave; the consequences, what will happen if they do not behave in the correct way; and the rights, what rights as the employer do you have.
And it is obviously important that you make sure your policy is well written and fit for purpose. Let's look at the case law example of Walters and Asda stores. An employee who is a manager makes a post on her personal Facebook page in her own time and on her own computer. The comment made is set out on the slide. She has 10 years of service and a clean disciplinary record. There is a detailed policy in place giving examples of what constitutes minor and gross misconduct in relation to the social media policy.
Now clearly, according to their own policy provisions, the employee's actions fall within the category of minor misconduct, but the employer, Asda, dismissed her for gross misconduct. It tried to argue that because she was a manager it made a difference. The Employment Tribunal found that she was both unfairly and wrongfully dismissed. If you have a policy, then as the employer you must stick to it. Whilst the tribunal did make a reduction of 50% to the compensation awarded, to reflect the contributory fault of the employee for her dismissal, it was still an unfair dismissal.
And the lesson to learn here is to write your social media policy carefully.
You also need to ensure that your employees actually read the policy. 3/4 of those surveyed by us last summer included the social media policy in their employee handbook. In the case of Ward and Marston plc, the employee said that he was not aware of the company's social media policy. He had, however, signed an acknowledgement set out on the slide. At first glance, this wording might seem sufficient to evidence knowledge of the social media policy, but the tribunal held that this was an acknowledgement of the terms of his employment only, and not the handbook. No evidence could be produced to show that Mr. Ward had actually been given the handbook, even though it was company practice to issue it during induction. The lesson to learn from this case is that you need to ensure you have express evidence of the employee having read and understood your social media policy.
Thank you for watching. But just before you go, no social media session would be complete without us sharing our social media presence with you. So please do follow us on Twitter @EmployHeroes and connect with us on LinkedIn. Please also get in touch should you need any employment law assistance. We would be happy to help.
And do check out our other podcasts for more information about social media in the workplace. Bye for now.